She left me for a rich guy. But he had a dark secret. She traded love for money, but little did she know her perfect man was hiding something terrifying. Stay till the end for the shocking twist. I should have seen it coming. Looking back, the signs were everywhere. The way she started caring more about luxury than love. The way she talked about people who had money like they were on a different level above the rest of us. At first, I thought it was just a phase, something she'd grow out of. After all, we had something real. Or at least, I thought we did. We had been together for 3 years. 3 years of laughter, late-night talks, supporting each other through every struggle. We didn't have much, but we had each other. I worked hard, saving up for a future with her, dreaming of the day I could give her the life she deserved. But in the end, it turned out she wanted something else. Something I couldn't give her. It started with the little things. She would scroll through social media, looking at influencers flaunting designer bags, expensive vacations, luxury cars. She'd sigh muttering, "Must be nice." I'd laugh it off, telling her, "One day we'll have all that too." But I didn't realize that one day wasn't soon enough for her. Then came the new friend. Some guy she met through work. She casually mentioned him at first, saying he was successful and so driven. She said he had his own business, traveled the world, owned a penthouse in the city. I didn't think much of it, why would I? I trusted her. But then she started changing. She suddenly had expensive new clothes, things I knew she couldn't afford on her salary alone. When I asked, she brushed it off, saying she had been saving or found a great deal. She started going out more, always with some vague excuse about networking or team outings. And the worst part? She started looking at me differently. Like I wasn't enough anymore. I still remember the night everything fell apart. She came home late, later than usual. I was waiting for her, my mind already drowning in suspicions I didn't want to believe. She didn't even look guilty. In fact, she looked excited. Like she had already made up her mind about something, and whatever it was, I wasn't a part of it. "We need to talk," she said, her voice oddly calm. I already knew what was coming. "I've been thinking about us," she continued, "and I just don't think we want the same things." I clenched my jaw, forcing myself to stay calm. "What do you mean?" She hesitated for a second before saying the words that would stay with me forever. "I met someone." Silence. That cold, suffocating silence that follows betrayal. She kept talking, explaining how he was different, how he could give her the life she always dreamed of. She made it sound like she had no choice, like this was just the natural course of things. Like I was just a stepping stone to something better. I didn't yell. I didn't beg. I didn't even ask her to stay. I just stood there, nodding slowly, feeling the weight of 3 years collapse in an instant. She left that night, packing a bag like it was the easiest decision she'd ever made. And just like that, I was nothing to her. At first, I told myself I wouldn't care. That I wouldn't look her up, wouldn't check to see how she was doing. But curiosity got the best of me. A few weeks later, I found her social media. She had gone public with him, this rich, successful guy who had swooped in and taken her away. Pictures of them in first-class flights, dining in 5-star restaurants, living the life she had always wanted. And I'll admit it, at first it stung. Seeing her happy while I was left picking up the pieces. But something didn't sit right. There was something in her eyes, in the way she smiled in those photos. It wasn't real. Then I got a message. Not from her, but from someone who knew him. Someone who had a warning. That was the moment I realized she had no idea what she had just walked into. The message came late at night, just as I was about to put my phone away. At first, I thought it was some kind of prank, but as I read through it, a sick feeling settled in my gut. "I saw your ex with him. You don't know me, but you need to hear this. He's not who he says he is. She's in danger." I stared at the words, my mind racing. Danger? What did that even mean? The guy was rich, successful, what could possibly be wrong with him? But something about the way the message was written, the urgency behind it, made me take it seriously. I hesitated for a moment before typing back. "Who are you? How do you know him?" Seconds later, another message popped up. "I worked for him. He has a pattern. He finds women like her beautiful, ambitious, looking for a better life. He gives them everything. And then he takes it all away." I felt a chill run down my spine. I didn't want to believe it. It was easy to tell myself that this had nothing to do with me, that she had made her choice and I had no reason to care anymore. But no matter how much I tried to convince myself, I couldn't ignore it. "Takes it all away?" I replied. "What do you mean?" The answer came almost immediately. At first, he treats them like queens. Expensive gifts, trips, everything they ever wanted. But once they're dependent on him, he changes. He isolates them, controls them, and when he gets bored, he destroys them. I swallowed hard. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, unsure of what to say. It sounded too extreme, too crazy to be true. But then I thought about her, about how easily she had walked away, how convinced she was that she had found something better. She had no idea what kind of man she was really dealing with. "How do you know all this?" I asked. This time, there was a long pause before the response. "Because I saw it happen before. And I barely got away." A cold sweat broke out on my skin. My hands tightened into fists as I read the words over and over, trying to make sense of it all. It didn't matter that she had broken me. It didn't matter that she had chosen him over me. If she was in danger, I couldn't just stand by and do nothing. I started searching for more information about him. His social media, his business, anything that could tell me if this was real or just some bitter ex-employee trying to stir up trouble. On the surface, everything looked perfect. He was well-connected, had a spotless reputation, and was constantly surrounded by beautiful women. But the deeper I dug, the more unsettling things became. There were whispers, stories that didn't quite make it to the headlines but existed in the corners of the internet. Old forum posts about women who had disappeared after dating him. Comments that had been deleted, accounts that no longer existed. But the biggest red flag? None of his past relationships lasted more than a year. And not one of his exes ever spoke about him. It was like they had all been erased. I felt a lump form in my throat. Had she walked straight into a trap? I had to find out for sure. That night, I did something I never thought I'd do. I went looking for her. I knew where they liked to go, the restaurants they posted pictures from, the high-end places she had once only dreamed of. And finally, after hours of waiting, I spotted them. She looked different. Not just in the way she dressed, everything about her seemed off. She was smiling, but it didn't reach her eyes. She clung to him like she was afraid to let go, and he had that look. The same look I had seen in pictures in every story I had read. Possessive. Controlling. Like she was his property. I wanted to tell myself I was imagining things. That I was just bitter, that I was overthinking it. But then, as they walked past me, I heard something that made my blood run cold. She laughed at something he said, a soft, nervous laugh. And then he gripped her wrist just for a second, just tight enough for her to wince. Just tight enough for me to see the fear flicker across her face before she forced the smile back on. I knew that look. She wasn't happy. She was trapped. And whether she wanted my help or not, I wasn't about to let her become just another one of his forgotten victims. I followed them from a distance, my mind racing with everything I had just seen. That brief flash of fear in her eyes, the way his grip tightened on her wrist, it wasn't normal. She wasn't acting like the confident, ambitious woman I had known for years. She was acting like someone who had lost control of her own life. And that was exactly what he wanted. I had to do something, but what? I couldn't just walk up to her and tell her she was making a mistake. She wouldn't listen. She had already convinced herself that this man was everything she ever wanted. And even if she did have doubts, she was too deep into it now. She wouldn't admit it, not to me, not to anyone. So I waited. They entered a high-end lounge, the kind of place where people paid more for a drink than I made in a week. I wasn't dressed for a place like this, but I didn't care. I walked in, keeping my distance, pretending I belonged. They sat at a private table, surrounded by other people, but I could tell this wasn't a social gathering. This was his world, and she was just another accessory. I watched as he leaned in, whispering something in her ear. She smiled, but her fingers clenched around her glass so tightly I thought it might shatter. He placed a hand on her knee, possessive, almost like he was staking his claim. And then I saw something that confirmed everything the stranger had told me. Another woman sitting across from them, looking at my ex with pity. She had that same hollow expression, like she had seen this before, like she already knew how this was going to end. And then, as if she sensed me watching, her eyes met mine. For a split second, I thought she would look away, pretend she hadn't noticed me. But she didn't. Instead, she gave me the smallest, almost imperceptible nod. It was a warning. I needed proof. If I had any chance of getting her out of this, I needed something she couldn't deny. Something that would make her see the truth even if she didn't want to. So I waited. Hours passed, the crowd began to thin, and eventually they got up to leave. I followed them outside, staying in the shadows, watching as they walked toward his car. She hesitated just for a second, as if debating whether she should get in. He noticed, and without missing a beat, he leaned in and whispered something in her ear. Whatever it was, it made her tense up. Then she nodded quickly, got into the passenger seat, and let him drive her away. I clenched my jaw. This was worse than I thought. She wasn't just dating a manipulative guy, she was already under his control. I needed more information. Over the next few days, I started digging. I reached out to the person who had messaged me asking for more details. They hesitated at first, afraid of saying too much, but eventually they gave me a name. Someone else who had been in her exact position before. I found her online. At first, she ignored my messages. But when I mentioned his name, everything changed. "Meet me in person," she wrote. "I can't say this over text." I met her at a small cafe, out of the way, somewhere he wouldn't think to look. She was nervous, constantly glancing over her shoulder, speaking in hushed tones. "He's dangerous," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I know what you're trying to do, but if she doesn't see it herself, you won't be able to convince her." I exhaled slowly. "Then help me. Tell me everything." She hesitated, then took a deep breath. "It starts the same way. He makes you feel special, like you're the only woman in the world. He gives you everything, money, trips, gifts. And before you realize it, you've become completely dependent on him. That's when the real control starts." I stayed silent, letting her talk. "He isolates you. Cuts you off from your friends, your family. At first, it's subtle. He makes you think it's your choice, that you just don't need anyone else. But then, the rules start. The expectations. What you wear, who you talk to, where you go. And if you ever push back, if you ever question him," she trailed off, her hands trembling. I swallowed hard. "What happens?" She met my eyes, and for the first time I saw pure fear. "He ruins you." The words sent a chill down my spine. She continued, her voice lower now. "Not just emotionally. Financially. Socially. He makes sure you have nothing left when he's done with you. And by the time you realize what's happening, it's too late." I leaned forward. "How did you get out?" She exhaled shakily. "I was lucky. I had someone who helped me before he could completely destroy me." A heavy silence hung between us. I already knew what she was going to say next. "She doesn't see it yet," she said. "But she will. And when she does, she's going to need someone to help her. Because trust me, he won't let her leave easily." I clenched my fists. This was worse than I had imagined. I thought she had just chosen money over love, that she had been blinded by wealth and luxury. But this wasn't just about money. This was about control. Power. A man who took and took until there was nothing left. And now she was trapped. I stood up, determination burning through me. "Then I guess I'll be that someone." The woman gave me a long, knowing look. "Then you better be ready for a fight." Because this wasn't just about proving to my ex that she had made a mistake. This was about saving her before it was too late. I spent the next few days preparing, knowing that I had to be careful. This wasn't just about telling her the truth anymore, this was about getting her out safely. If what I had learned was true, then the man she was with wasn't just some arrogant rich guy. He was something much worse. A predator. A master manipulator. Someone who built women up just to break them down. And the moment they tried to leave, he made sure they regretted it. I kept an eye on her social media, looking for any clues about where she might be, who she might be with. Her posts were all carefully curated, showing off an extravagant lifestyle, expensive dinners, weekend getaways, designer outfits. But the more I looked, the more obvious it became. The smile in her pictures was forced. Her captions felt hollow, like she was trying too hard to convince the world that she was happy. Then I found what I was looking for. A new post, her checking into a luxury resort just outside the city. She and him celebrating some special occasion. A few years ago, I might have believed she was living the dream. But now I knew better. I had to act fast. That night, I drove out to the resort, my hands gripping the wheel as my mind raced through every possible scenario. What if she refused to listen? What if he was already watching her every move? What if I was too late? When I arrived, I parked a few blocks away and walked in like I belonged there. No one paid me any attention, just another guest, blending into the background. I scanned the lobby, my pulse quickening when I spotted them at the bar. She sat beside him, her body language stiff, her smile barely reaching her eyes. He, on the other hand, was completely at ease, leaning back in his seat, swirling a drink in his hand. He had that same confident smirk I had seen in every picture. The look of a man who thought he was untouchable. I didn't approach them directly. That would be a mistake. Instead, I waited, watching from a distance, searching for an opening. Then, after about an hour, she got up. He barely acknowledged her as she whispered something in his ear, excusing herself. I watched as she disappeared toward the back hallway, toward the restrooms. This was my chance. I followed her, heart pounding in my chest. When I turned the corner, I saw her standing near a mirror, adjusting her makeup. She still hadn't seen me. I took a deep breath and stepped forward. "Hey!" She froze. Her eyes widened when she turned and saw me. For a moment, she looked like she had seen a ghost. Then her expression hardened. "What are you doing here?" she hissed, glancing around like she was afraid someone would see us. I held up my hands, trying to show I wasn't here to start a fight. "I needed to talk to you." She shook her head, already turning away. "You need to leave. You can't be here." I stepped closer, lowering my voice. "Listen to me. I know what's going on. I know who he really is." She scoffed. You don't know anything. I know he isolates women, I said quickly, forcing her to look at me. I know he controls them. I know that right now you feel like you can't leave even if you wanted to. Her breath hitched. It was barely noticeable, but I saw it. The crack in her facade. The tiny moment of doubt. I pressed forward. I spoke to someone, I continued. Someone who was with him before you. She told me everything. The way he works. The way he breaks people down until they have nothing left. Tell me, when was the last time you saw your friends? Your family? When was the last time you made a decision without asking for his approval? She opened her mouth, then closed it again. She was shaking now, her fingers gripping the edge of the sink. I know you think I'm just jealous, I said. That I just want you back. But this isn't about us. This is about you. And if you don't get out now, you might not get another chance. Tears welled up in her eyes, but she quickly blinked them away. You don't understand, she whispered. It's not that simple. Yes, it is, I shot back. You leave. Right now. Before it's too late. She looked at me, then really looked at me. And for the first time in a long time, I saw the woman I used to know. The woman who had been full of dreams, of fire, of ambition. The woman who had been slowly disappearing, replaced by someone afraid to even breathe without permission. But before she could answer, a voice cut through the air like a knife. There you are. We both turned at the same time. He stood in the doorway, his expression unreadable. But I could see it in his eyes, the calculated coldness, the quiet rage simmering just beneath the surface. He stepped inside, closing the door behind him, locking it with a casual flick of his wrist. My blood ran cold. She sucked in a breath, taking a step back. I was just. Just what? He asked smoothly, tilting his head. Having a nice little chat with your ex? His eyes flickered toward me, his lips curling into something that wasn't quite a smile. That's bold of you. I have to admit, I didn't expect you to come all this way. I stood my ground, my pulse hammering in my ears. She doesn't belong to you. His smirk deepened. Doesn't she? And just like that, I knew. I had made a mistake. I had walked straight into his trap. I didn't move. I couldn't. Every muscle in my body was coiled, waiting for whatever came next. He stepped forward, slow and deliberate, his confidence unwavering. He wasn't just some arrogant rich guy, he was a predator who had played this game before. And right now, I was standing exactly where he wanted me. She was frozen beside me, torn between fear and disbelief. Please, she whispered, her voice barely audible. Let's just go back to the table. His eyes flicked toward her, his expression softening in a way that made my skin crawl. Now, he murmured, brushing a strand of hair from her face. We were having such a wonderful evening. And then this little distraction had to show up. His gaze snapped back to me, dark and unforgiving. Tell me, do you really think she wants your help? I clenched my fists. I know she does. He chuckled. That's cute. His voice was calm, almost amused, but his eyes burned with something far more dangerous. You think you're the first one to try and save her? He turned to her, reaching out to take her hand. Tell him, sweetheart. She flinched but didn't pull away. Instead, she stared at me, her lips parted slightly as if she wanted to say something but couldn't. Her silence was enough. He smirked. See? You don't get it. You already lost. I had two options. I could fight him right here, cause a scene, get thrown out of the resort, and accomplish nothing. Or I could walk away and leave her behind. Neither was an option I was willing to take. So I did the one thing he didn't expect. I pulled out my phone. He tensed instantly, eyes narrowing. What do you think you're doing? I turned the screen toward him. Live streaming, I lied. Everyone's watching. Your friends. Your business partners. Your whole perfect little world. I tilted my head. Still want to have this conversation? For the first time, I saw something flicker in his eyes, hesitation. It was barely there, but it was enough. His grip on her hand tightened. You really think anyone would believe you? I don't need them to believe me, I shot back. I just need them to see you for what you are. A tense silence filled the room. His jaw twitched, his fingers flexing like he wanted to rip the phone out of my hands. But he didn't. Because he couldn't be sure. Maybe I really was broadcasting. Maybe someone really was watching. And men like him? They only thrived in the shadows. Finally, he exhaled sharply through his nose and let go of her hand. This isn't over, he murmured, stepping back. Not for her. I ignored him and turned to her. Come with me. She hesitated, glancing between us. For a moment, I thought she'd stay. That she'd sink back into his web, let herself believe his lies one more time. But then she moved. She walked past him. Toward me. His smile vanished. I grabbed her hand, pulling her toward the exit. I didn't stop to look back. I didn't need to. I could feel his eyes burning into my back, seething with unspoken threats. We didn't speak until we were outside, breathing in the cold night air. She was shaking, arms wrapped around herself as if she was just now realizing what had happened. "He won't let this go," she whispered. I turned to her, forcing her to meet my gaze. "Neither will I." She inhaled sharply, her lips pressing together. Then finally she nodded. We left together that night. It wasn't easy. He tried to reach her, to manipulate her, to pull her back into his world. But this time she didn't fall for it. This time she saw him for what he really was. And me? I walked away knowing that I hadn't just lost her. I had saved her. She thought she had found the perfect man, that money and power would bring her happiness. But in the end, she learned the truth the hard way. Because no amount of wealth could hide the monster behind the mask. If you made it this far, let me know what you think in the comments. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more stories like this.